Hi there. I'm going to try and record a video on um, how I would put together the mixer. I did already do this recording once, but I noticed my volume in that one was pretty low, so I'm going to try and do this one more time. I want to start off by first pulling in our reference image, so I'm going to go into the orthographic views. Because it's from a side view, I'd rather put it in the right orthographic view. If I use the hotkey Shift V for the viewport, I can pull up the viewport settings, and then I want to go to the back tab, and then I want to look for my reference image that was provided in the assignment and place it in my scene. And then I want to create a cube, and I'm just going to Google a vintage sunbeam mixer for the dimensions on the length, width, and height. And I'm going to make a cube, and mine is in inches, so I'm going to do, let's see, on the length, which is going to be along the Z, it's going to be 14.8, so on the Z, 0.8, and then I can type in IN for inches, and that'll pull that up. On the width, it is 13.6 inches, and then on the height, it's 12.05 inches. So now I've got my box, and I'm going to change, let's see, well first, I'm going to do Shift V for the viewport settings again, so I can change my size. Offset it on the Y until I fit it right in here. And of course, this mixer dimension is not going to be exact to the dimensions that were in the description, because they are obviously different mixers. Next, I'm going to get this cube out of the way. If you want, you can just turn it off. I like to just have it just in case I need to, see the size of one of my other views for some reason. So I will just put a render tag on there for the display tag and use lines. So that way, no matter which view it's in, it'll only be in lines. And then I'm going to make a layer. So your layers are usually right next to the attributes tab, whether it be here on this side if you're in your older version or right here. I'm going to name this reference, place my cube in there, and I'm going to lock it and hide it from my object manager, and then go back to attributes. And next I'm going to start with the subdivision surface modeling. So I'm going to place a cylinder in my scene, and I want it to face the Z direction. So forward and back, from the right is the front view. And then I want to turn it, Control Z, on the B, 30 degrees. And then I want to change the height segments to 1, and I hit Tab to go to the rotation segments and change that to 6. And the reason I rotated it 30 degrees was so that I could have it perfectly symmetried like this. You can always come into here and begin rotation and then hold down Shift to move in increments of 10. So I've got that set up, and I probably want to scale down my cylinder quite a bit. And then E. And then because I rotated it first, I have these two handles, right? So I can see both handles. So this outer handle right here is for the width, and this center handle is for the length. And the only reason I have these yellow dot handles is because I am in model mode. So if I were in any of the polygon, edge, or point modes, I wouldn't see these handles. So I'm going to make the width of this much bigger than I think I'll need, because I know the subdivision surface is going to really pull that in. So that's good. And then next I'm going to make a null, and I'm going to call this backup. And then I'm going to hold down Alt and click on these visibility buttons, basically is what I call them. And I'm going to, if I hold down Alt and I click it, it changes both at the same time. So that way I want both of them red. And I'm going to name this body 1 because this is the very first version of the body before I've made any major changes. And then I'm going to make it editable, and I'm going to go into point mode. And then I want to use the rectangle selection because I know that that by default has visible only turned off. And I want to select the left side of my model and delete that. So that way, whenever I need to make a selection from the side view, it's not going to interfere with that. And then I'm going to place this in a symmetry. So I want to make the symmetry first, and then place the body in the symmetry. I'm going to call this body 2 because now we've made some changes. I'm going to place that in backup in case I need to get to that point at some point. Next thing is I'm going to, for now, turn on in display garage shading lines. The hotkey is NB. So that way I can just see my geometry. There we go. And I want to take these front 2 edges and I want to dissolve them. The hotkey is MN. And then I want to make sure I don't have that stray point. So yeah, that point didn't stay there. All right. So that's now set up to start do a little bit of extruding. So I'm going to extrude it forward, and then I'm going to change this into squared off edges. So I have 2 ways I can do this. I can hit T for the scale tool, change this to the world coordinate system. First, start dragging the scale tool, then hold down Shift. And that will make it increment. And you want to increment down to 0. Or I can come down to the coordinate manager. In the older versions, it's just right here. And in the newer versions, you need to hit this button to turn it on. And this goes in the order of position, scale, or sorry, position, rotation, scale now. And so I want to make the Y scale, because that's this green handle, 0. So I'm going to change that to 0. Interesting. No, that definitely didn't do that. Huh. Typically it works, but I guess not this time. Oh, it's because it's object relative. So I want to make sure I have it set to world relative. That would definitely help. And the reason that it's erroring a little bit like that is because I should probably, it's good practice, to change the axis of my model, so in model mode, to not be rotated. And I'll know it's rotated if I'm in object mode and it's at an angle like this. So with enable axis turned on, I can come down to the coordinate system and zero that out, and it'll zero it out without turning my model. Or I could have just, you know, hit rotation and then changed it. That's another way of doing that. Alright, so that's fixed. And now, if I had been in object relative mode, it would be fine when I am selecting that edge. Yep. It's just because of the angle that the axis was in. Okay, so we've gotten that far. Next is to, one, scale it up a bit so that way it matches with the size of the front of this mixer. And then I want to line it up with this back end right here. And then I'm going to hold down Control and drag it out all the way to the front end. And the reason I'm kind of ignoring this bottom half is because I'm going to slide them over in a minute. So the top half is more my concern right now. So now I've got that set up. And I know it looks a bit funny with the back larger than the front, but when it comes down to it, the model is going to end up being much thinner because of the subdivision surface. And I think the other thing I would like to do is right now, while I'm early on into this, I'm going to select this side polygon and I'm going to just drag it out wider, because I think I prefer a wider look in the front here. Okay, so we've got that done. And then now I need to slide over my edges. So I'm just going to grab this edge and scoot it over in. I'm going to grab this edge, but I'm also going to grab this edge. I'm going to scoot both of those in. And then I'm going to grab this point and I'm going to scoot that in a little as well. Just because I want this nice diagonal that's going to be there. All right. So that looks like it's going to be okay. I might want to scoot this edge in. So I'm going to take this one and this one and this one and scoot them in a little closer. There we go. And I just want it to line up with this curve right here. Okay, so now that that's set, I need to make sure, now that I've been doing all this control dragging, right? So when you hold down Control and drag out the polygon, like earlier, it was, extending the geometry, but while doing that, it also made some inner geometry. So if I am in a move, scale, or rotate tool, and I double click on an edge, it usually does a loop selection. But it's not always perfect. So I could also do, so our hotkeys that are, I guess like the ones that you aren't hitting at the exact same time, the ones where you do one and then another, have like a menu list. So U is for most of your selection stuff, and then, K is for like your cutting stuff, M is for like your modeling things, so sliding, welding, creating points, rotating, extruding, things like that. So I'm going to use U. I'm going to use UL for loop selection. And then I'm going to use UF for fill selection so that I can select these inner polygons. And then I'm going to delete those so that way we don't run into the issues later on. And now I've gotten this far, I'm going to name this body 3. I'm going to put that in my backup because I'm going to make another large change in a moment. And what that is going to be is I'm going to select these edges on the side, but I don't want this one, or that one. I want this one and that one. And then I'm going to use the slide tool, which the hotkey for that is MO. right here, slide. And if I hold down Control, like how I did with the polygons to extrude them out, it'll create additional geometry. So it'll create an additional edge. And I want to drag, so here, I'll show it from the side so you can see what's happening. I want to drag where it's coming inwards. So that would mean I'm dragging from left to right. And so that drags it in. And while I'm doing this, so I just undid, I want to take a look at my right view. And I want it to line up with this edge, well, more with this edge, because I can drag back out to this edge. So I more want it to line up with this edge. So I'm going to zoom in on this one, then I'll hold down Control, and I'm going to drag inwards. And it's kind of hard to see, but you can kind of see the orange highlight just slightly behind the blue edge line, and you can just line it up. And then, now, I want to select the polygons that were in here. Or, well, first, let's take that edge. Sorry. We'll take that edge and we'll drag it back. Like we needed to, like I mentioned we would do earlier. So I want to drag it back out that way. Because I don't want it to overlap so much. Alright, so now we can select both of those. And then we're going to use the extrude tool, which is D for the shortcut, or MT, but D is faster. And then if I drag from left to right, it creates that additional geometry that extends out on the model. So now we've got that. Cool. That looks good. Alright, body 4 now. So I'm going to take that and drag that in because we're going to be making a lot of major changes again. And I'm going to use KL for loop cut. And I'm going to make some cuts right here, one slightly outside of that, and then 2 on the inside. And I'm going to use that to select these 2 center points and drag them down. And I probably want to scale them out pretty wide, but not to where they break the geometry here. And then I'm going to put this in a subdivision surface so I can check and see how this looks. Yeah, that looks like it matches up pretty good. Now we need to get to sharpening our geometry a little bit more. So I'm going to first turn off subdivision surface. And I'm going to make a loop cut back here. And I want to get it pretty close, so I want like 99 sounds good. And then I need another loop cut right around where this ends, where it's going to fade off. And then I need to make a loop selection, so that's UL. Make that selection, UF to fill, and fill in this whole front half. And then I'm going to do KL for my knife loop. And then I'm going to restrict to selection, and I'm going to make these cuts to sharpen the edges. And I don't want them too close because then it's going to make my edges like extremely sharp. So if you want sharper edges, you know, get as close as you can. If you want slightly rounder edges, you can be a little bit further away. And so I need 2 on either side of that. And I need 1 on this side as well, coming around this way. Let's see if I can get the tool to respond. And then if it's not exactly where I want it, I can use this arrow up here that pops up to drag it where I would like it. I need another one at the face, another one at the piece that extends out, and another one near the front edge of the piece that extends out. Cool. And then maybe one more down here. And that should add so much supporting geometry that everything will be nice and sharp. So when I turn back on that subdivision surface, yep, looks pretty good. And so one thing is I want to make this dip a little bit more prominent back here. So I probably, see right here, this lines up pretty okay. Maybe I could scale it down a little bit more, but because there's so much geometry over here, it doesn't really flow down like I would like it to. So maybe I'll take the loop selections of the edges, and I'm going to use the scale tool, and then I'm going to scale it down, but if you can tell from the front view, my axis is really far in the middle here. And so if I right click on that arrow, it undoes, or it sets it back to its default, which is 0. And I want to place this X at -100 so that way it's centered to this, and then just scale it down a little there, and maybe even take the loop right here. I don't know if it'll listen. There we go. And scale that one down. Maybe just a little bit. Don't know. I do probably need one more cut that's much closer over here. So I'm going to see if making a cut there helps. And it's not wanting to make the cut. If it's not wanting to make the cut, I can at least force a cut by holding down Control and dragging my edge in a little bit. And so by using that slide tool earlier, I can move around these points a bit. And that at least gives it that little bit more of a dip. And I know I can take this point right here and bring it down to sharpen that drop there. And so it seems like we're getting closer, but I do want to smooth out this area. So I know I can do that by taking these points and using that slide tool earlier and just dragging them further away from each other, because they are creating this geometry that loops around. Back into itself, and so by spreading them apart a little bit, that gives them, see, I might need to actually leave this one closer, just because I noticed that that is causing a bump up here. And so I think we're pretty good now. It's been smoothed out. I think I want to take these points here and I want to drag them down so that they line up with this curve right here. Same with these 3 points here. And then take these 3 points and line them up with that curve there. Maybe lower that one. And these 3 here. And pull them up and line them up here. But we always have to make sure to check back to our original geometry and make sure we're not too far off. That looks okay. Turn back on subdivision surface. And maybe take these points up here, drag them up a little more. And these down here, drag them down. I think we're pretty okay. So I'm going to turn off the shader for the lines. So N is basically our hotkey list for our shading types. So NB is for lines and A is for no lines. And because I didn't do those cuts super close, I get these almost beveled edges instead of, like this one might have just a little, it might be a little bit too close, so it's sharp like that. But I think we're pretty okay. So we're there. Now let's cut to the next part and let's work on the handle. And so, simply put, all it is draw the spline. So I'm using the spline pen tool. It's right here because I have the points mode on. If I were in one of these other modes, it wouldn't show up there. If you need to find it another way, don't forget to use Shift-C, type in spline pen, right? It'll come up that way, right there, model. Or with something selected, you can right click and look for spline pen, spline pen, spline pen. I guess it's not in this one. Tools. Spline primitive. I know it's in older versions, it's also available in here, the spline pen. But I'm just going to select it from here, and I'm going to draw out my handle. And so I'm just going to draw one point. If I click and hold and drag, I get handles like in Photoshop. And I can click back on a point and readjust it if I need to. There we go. And then next point, and I can drag out. If I hold down Shift, I can break the Bezier even while drawing. And then I can draw the next point. I'll have to come back and fix that one. I can probably make this one a sharp point and then maybe extend that one out. I'll come back to it. This point down here and connect to that point there. And then so this point right here, I'm thinking of changing it so if I right click, not on the point but away from the point, I can select soft interpolation, so that changes it to a Bezier handle. And I can hold down Shift and I can adjust those handles to match up. And there's just a balance between the handles on how to get it between. And if you're having a hard time seeing, right, you can always use Shift V and change the transparency of your reference image so that way you can see things more clear. That would definitely help. And maybe 80 is a good number, right? So now we have our spline drawn. Cool. It looks good. I'm going to take these 2 points here on the bottom though. I'm going to drag them down into my model here. So that way, later on, when it's extruded, it's going to look like it's inset inside of the body of the model. So now we can put this inside of extrude. And if I hold down Alt, that will automatically make the item I had selected a child of the thing I'm creating. So extrude is automatically set to 100 centimeters, so I'm sure that that is way long. So I'm maybe going to choose a small number, like, I don't know, 2. And then if I know it's offset to 2, right? And my extrude coordinates are currently at 0. I guess because my spline, I don't know. Interesting. But whatever the case may be, I know that I need to offset by 1. So towards the negative x, if I put it at -1, my handle should be right in the center. And that looks good. And extrude also has cap settings. So I want to turn on bevel shape, size, and I probably want to use something small because I know my model is quite small. So maybe 0.1 or 0.2, right? So that I can get those nice rounded edges on my handle. Looks good. All right, next thing's next. Let's work on these little cylinders here. I want to call them motors. So this is handle. This is... If I just hit the down key while naming things, it'll toggle through the different ones. This is body. And so I want to create a null called done, just because sometimes that can help keep things organized and out of the way. So I need a cylinder now, and I need to scale it way down, and I need to place it right about where I'm going to have the other one. Alright, so I'm going to take my cylinder and I'm going to lower the height segments, and I'm going to probably only make it as wide as the widest part of this. And then if I go to model mode, I get my handles back, so I can shrink it down and I can move it down. So I think what I want is to line it up about, well, you know what, let's make it the whole size, right? We'll do that. And then I'm going to name this motor, and I'm going to hit C to make it editable. I'm going to go to polygon mode, and it looks like it's dead center. So I'm going to go back to model mode real quick, so that way I'm moving the actual axis. I can move it that way, and then now I can go back to polygon mode, and I want to select all the polygons on top, so I'm going to just use the live selection tool. Hotkey is 9. And then I know that my axis for this is set to a weird number because I used it for the earlier one. So if I just use my right mouse button on this arrow on the right side, it'll zero that out. And then I want to scale it down uniformly, so I'm not clicking on any axis. Right there. So that looks good. And then you can keep it this way, and you could just make a loop cut right there. And then, oh right, I have to turn off restrict to selection real quick. There you go. So you want to make a loop cut about right there, and that should, that's probably why it wasn't working earlier. So when my loop path cut wasn't working, I should have made sure to check if restrict to selection was turned on. Right, so here you can make a cut here, and then when you do your UV unpacking later, you can just select this part and that part, and then when you color them later, it'll be easier. If you want to get fancy with it, you can use the bevel tool, and I'm going to select this loop of edges down here. And so all I did was I went to the move tool, went to edge mode. When you're in edge mode, if you double click on an edge, it should select the loop. See? And if you are in polygon mode, double clicking will select anything connected to it. And if you're in point mode, it lets you change the coordinates of the points. I don't use that one as much, but I do use the loop selection by double clicking quite often. So you can use the bevel tool, and that can bevel out your edge, right? And then I can do a selection UL on this piece in the center, and then use I for inset, and that can inset it in just a little. Or, you know what, let's just use D for extrude. I'm not going to inset it. I'm just going to only extrude it in a little bit. And that looks cool. If you don't want to extrude it, you can also, like if you want it to go straight in, because if you notice when I extruded it, it went down at an angle a bit. You can also just hold down Control and use the scale tool, right? And that should also give you a similar result. And you want to use this little green triangle when you do it, so that way it doesn't scale height-wise. It only scales width-wise. So cool. We got that. And just pull that in a little more. That looks cool. It's optional. All right, nice. The motor's done with something simple. We can make it fancy. I should make sure this edge is beveled, and I can use the bevel deformer, but it needs to be like really small. So when I place that in there, I want to make sure to turn this down like a lot. 0.05, and turn up the subdivisions a little bit. Yeah, that looks cool. Let's see. Right, so something nice is you can just make one, and I'm going to just make a symmetry, and I'm going to call this sim stuff, because there's going to probably be more than one thing that I want to shove in the symmetry. So this is one. Later on, I probably want to shove the mixers, the whisks in there, maybe the hinge. I'm not sure what else, but for now, that looks good. Alright, so I got that far, and I did have to cut it for a moment and come back. It's kind of hard for me to consistently record at home. So next I'm going to work on this dial in the back because I know it is a bit of a complicated piece. All it is we are just going to do like we did for the extrude. We're going to make part of it with a spline, but we're only going to make half the spline. So I'm going to come up to here, and then I want to drag, click and drag, so that way I could get, and I want to try and make this straight. And then I'll just hold down Control, and that'll make a new point in my spline, and then drag up this way. And the reason I want this to be straight is because it'll make things easier in the long run with the lathe. And then I want 2 areas of these points to be flat, so I want to scale these flat. And then I want to take these 2 points and I want to scale these flat. But I don't want my point. Let's see. I could just do this. I'll take this point and then I'll look at it from the front view, and I'm going to take my spline and I'm going to solo it. So I can solo anything in my viewport by hitting this eyeball button. I believe in older versions it's somewhere here on this side. And then I want to turn on snapping. And I'm going to use that to snap this point to that point, just because I want them to perfectly line up. And that does make things just, yes, it's slightly more difficult, but I'm going to turn off snapping again. There we go. It does, how do I word this? It keeps this from messing up. So lining it up that way makes things easier. So I can take these 2 and drag them slightly more that way. And then now we can put these in a lathe. But I'm going to use Shift-C, Axis, Center. We're going to probably need it a few more times, so after I open it, I want to grab these little 3 dots and I want to dock it right here in the middle. I'm going to see if I can scale. Nope, I get that big. All right. Okay, so I want to take, in model mode, the axis for this spline, and I want to snap it to 0 y, or well, negative 100 y, so all the way at the bottom. And then I want it in Z to go to negative 100 as well. And hit execute. And there we go. So now we have this at that point. And the reason I wanted to do this is so that way when I create the lathe and I hold down Alt, it will make it right at that point. And then I can go into the lathe and I want to go rotate. But when I rotate it, I'm going to need to hit some particular buttons. One, I want to hold down 7. And the reason I want to hold down 7 is that it will rotate the lathe without rotating my spline. And then, while I'm rotating, I want to hold down Shift, so that way I can move in increments of 10. And then I just want to move exactly 90 degrees to the right, so that way this lines up perfectly that way. And just double check our model. Yeah, that looks okay. Alright, so we got the dial done, and so we have 2 options. One, for this part of the dial that sticks out, we can just make a cube and obviously scale it way down. Hit E, there we go. Let's see, where are we? And then you can model it by, squishing it in a little bit on the end and all that fun stuff. That's one way to do it, right? I don't particularly like that way just because I don't, like the way it looks. Of course, you want to line this up like right to that edge and, make it look nice, right? Totally an option. The way I like to do it, this is dial 1 because this is going to get backed up. And then I'm going to hit C, make it editable. And before I hit C, I should make sure that in here, I want this to be lined up in a way that I can get a good extrude on this. So yeah, it does look lined up well. Right. So time to hit C, and then I want to go U, which is for selection, and then M is path selection, and I want to be in edge mode, and then I'm going to select from here to about there, here to there, and here to there, and I'm just holding down Shift. And I probably want to go all the way in with these, and then I'm going to use the slide tool, hold down Control, and drag it in. And then I'm going to use UL, right? And it looks like my loop is selected, but I'm getting some weird geometry back here. So what I should probably do is when I'm extruding it, instead of having these select, or when I'm doing that slide, like I did earlier, maybe it's best if I just select these two, and then I could do MO control drag, right? And then now I can do UF to fill that selection, E, and I could drag it out just a little bit, and then hold down Control, drag it out some more, and then hold down, or switch to T for the scale tool, and I can shrink it in a little. And now we have this nice looking dial that sticks out. And I probably want to scale it this way a little bit too. And then maybe move it that way a little more, just because I want this to have not as sharp of an edge. That looks nice. And now that we have that done, I can deselect, and then I want to make that bowl from earlier. So first we need to make the geometry that's going to get cut out. So scale that way down, move it up. Only select one axis at a time. If you don't want to have to be forced to select the axis, you can just start, you can hold down Shift and then start moving. That'll move you in one direction at a time. And if we're in model mode, we can use our little handles and make it about the size of one of these cutouts. Same width-wise, so when you're looking at this, you're wanting to also think about how wide this cut's going to be. And then the depth doesn't matter all that much. I mean, it kind of does, because you do want the depth from the center. So the center of this, right? You want it to line up to how deep you want it to go into the model. So that looks okay. Now we're going to make a cloner. So I want to make the cloner at the center of the dial. And I'm going to take it out, and then I'm going to put the cube in the cloner. Cube in the cloner, not the dial. There we go. And then I want the cloner type to be radial. So I'm going to close this Access Center tab just because I want some more space. So cloner, instead of grid type, radial. And then obviously the radius needs to be something much smaller. And so I'm going to just line it up with the outside of my dial. And then I need the start angle and end angle to be something much smaller. And if I have 1, 2, 3, 4 slits right here, I'm going to assume that there's 8 total, right? And then, let's see. Now we're on to picking numbers. And so it looks like this is covering, I don't know, 2/3, which would be, man, I'm bad at math. Let's see, what would 360 is about right there. I guess I could just try and line up to these points that I know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I could try and just line up with these. That doesn't look half bad. So now I want to pull the cloner forward and line it up about where that's going to be. And it seems like my cube that I had is longwise instead of the way that I had it a minute ago. So I'm going to rotate it not on, so on the P. So 90 degrees. There we go. That's better. So I've got that nice shape that I had earlier. And it looks like they're going to cut in the way I need them to. So now these are dial holes. D-A-I-L holes. There we go. And then I need to make a bowl. So I'm going to make a bowl and then take both of these, put them in there. The bowl says that A subtracts B. So because of that, it automatically, because I put the holes on the bottom and the dial on top, it came out in the right order. If for some reason you're noticing that yours is not coming out in that exact order, it's because of that. But I'm noticing that the way that this looks here looks a bit strange, and that could be if I go to polygon mode and I select one of these. Looks like my normals are correct. Maybe? They don't look blue. No, yeah, they're orange. It could just be the falling angle. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I'm going to try and see if I put a bevel on there, if that fixes that. So that means that I need to put this bool in a null. So I could just hit Alt-G, right? That groups that into a null. I'm going to call this dial. I'm going to make a bevel deformer, bevel, bevel, bevel. I'm going to put that in there. And then obviously it needs to be a lot smaller. That kind of fixed it a little bit. But it is causing some other issues, and that could be because on the bowl you need to tell it to create a single object, and that kind of fixed that. But in this case, the bevel needs to be like extremely small, and it makes me wonder if it's even worth it. It does cause some oddities. We could make it stop looking like that by going into here and just going into this fog tag, and could try deleting those, right? But then it makes everything super rough. I don't think that's what we're looking for. I could try and change the number on the fog tag. See if that helps. And it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't at the same time. So I'm going to just right click on those to reset those. Okay. And the reason that we're getting that is probably because of these poles right here that are created when the bevel is in place. We can see that by going to NB. You see how we get all this odd geometry, and that's because the angle that it's looking for is not exactly lined up with that. And so I can probably just turn up the angle, either turn down or turn up the angle threshold, right? So turning it down, turning it up didn't help. Maybe I turn it down. That's a lot though. I kind of got rid of this one, right? But at what cost? I could try to make this dip a little sharper. Maybe that'll help. Let's see. Or if I turn up the threshold, right? Let's just. I should just say no to this part having that, and instead this part having it. Right? And I feel like that's not so bad. Well, this comes down to decision making. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you to decide on that. Try making this sharper. That might help. Dial. I'll just use UM. You know, and I wonder if it could probably be, if I go UL, select this one, go E. I'll just drag it out a little more. See what that does. Yeah, I mean, making that further sharper did seem to fix that angle problem, I guess. Well, these are things to take into consideration when modeling. I guess we'll leave it for now, because I do need to move on. So I'm going to move on to the rest of the model real quick. The hinges, you're going to make them the same way that you made the extrude. You're just going to trace out their shape. And then, so let's do that real quick. We'll go to point mode, spline pen, shape, click and drag. Let's see, maybe I need to pull it in. Next point, click and drag. And there we go. And then I'm going to do something else in that. I'm going to make an end side, and then I'm going to scale it way down. I'm going to move it, and then I'm going to turn up the sides to something like 24. I'm going to scale it down again. If I hold down T, and then I let go of the mouse, and then T, that will let me temporarily use the scale tool if I want. And then I want to take both of these and I want to put them in a spline mask. That's right here. And what a spline mask does is it takes one and it cuts out the other. And we need to look at the settings for that. So we need to do this along the YZ because we got the green and the blue arrows here. So YZ. And then we want it to be A subtracts B. So that looks about right. And then now I can throw this in an extrude. So hold down Alt. There we go. And let's see what our results look like. Yep, that looks about right. And I probably don't want it extruded by 100. So let's make it maybe 0.5. Yeah, 0.5 looks fine. And then I can just move it over to one side. And so my dial's done, right? So I should put that in done. That would help. And then, let's see, back to our, this is going to be Hinge. That way I know what it's called. That could be about there. Yep. That actually looks fine. And I'm just going to put the hinge in symmetry stuff. But the thing is that I need to group these. So I need to take the hinge and the motor, go Alt-G, and I don't know, I could also name it sim stuff, right? There you go. And so now that'll symmetry this and that at the same time, because it'll just symmetry whatever's in the null. Okay, cool. That's done. And next we can do this arm. And the arm is literally going to be the same thing. Draw the spline, use the spline mask. I'm going to pause the video. Or you know what? No, I'll just do it at the same time. It's fine. And I'm actually going to take this end side that I already made for the other one. I'm going to hold down Control and drag it out, right? And that makes a copy. And so then I can take that one and I'm going to drag it here. And these are the same size. Hold down Control, drag it, and then hold down T, scale, let go of the mouse, and then the T, Control, drag, T, Control, drag, T. There we go. Alright, so now I got all those, and then I gotta draw my spline, of course. So this point, this point, this point. Draw my loop. Adjust where that's at. And then I can probably just hold down Shift to break this, to go that way, do that one, click and drag, and then close those off. That looks fine. I can select these bottom 2 points if I want. T, scale them down. E, move them down. Okay, that looks fine. And then I will put this in the spline mask. And then I want to take all of these, put them in there. Okay, so now that I've made my spline mask, I could put this in an extrude. And then pick a number. And if you're noticing anything weird, right, like they're coming out weird like this, this probably means that your spline and your end sides don't line up. And so, yeah, I can see that they don't line up. So I want to take all of these, go to coordinates, and it's on the X, right? So I can see that this red arrow is what I would want to move this way, right? So I can just come over here. And because I made the spline mask at the same point as this spline, right? That means that these are in the same location and these are not. So if I zero out these on the X, they'll be in the exact same location. So now if I turn back on the spline mask, there we go. We're functioning. Can move the extrude. And I probably want to put it further than I think, just because we're going to use a taper in a minute. And so extrude object, I don't know, like if I don't want it to be much, I could do 1.5 or maybe 2, right? And then, like I said earlier, if I go to the extrude and I go to coordinates, if it's 2, right, I want -1. And then I'm going to put this extrude, which is the arm, into a taper, which is going to be a deformer. And I want to make the taper a child of the arm, or of the extrude. And then I can go to object on taper and hit fit to parent. And that will fit it to the extrude. And then I want to turn up the strength. And because it's set to Y positive, it'll be facing towards the Y. And then I just want to turn up the strength until it's about as thin as I want it. And something about my arm that I noticed. I'm going to take this out. I'm going to go to my original spline. I want to go ahead and select these 2 points on my spline. And I'm going to make them a little bigger, or a little further in. And then I want to take the inside I had here. I'm going to just control drag that one into here. So that way I have a copy of it. Because I kind of want to have that same hole. But don't forget, we need to zero out the X. So that way it lines up with our object. Right, and now I can put the taper back in. And I can tell the taper to fit to parent again. Because our size has changed. But the taper is kind of squishing in a way that I don't like. Right here. So I'm not going to use taper. I forgot. So let's not use taper. Let's use an FFD, which is basically similar, but different. So if I make the FFD a child of the extrude, and then I say fit to parent, and I turn down these points to 2, the way that it works is that the object inside deforms based on the deformation of the points of the wireframe of the box. And then I can just scale this in. And that'll give me a taper without giving me that weird bulge towards the top. Cool, so we've done that. And this little hinge is literally just a tiny cube. I just make one. Model mode. Squish it down. There we go. And then we just want to put that in a bend deformer, or put a bend deformer in that. Sorry, other way around. And then fit to parent. And then turn up the strength. And if we're getting it weird, we want to do it along the negative Z, because Z is pointing that way, right? So negative Z, fit to parent. And then if you notice, this little arrow here is facing that way, and I want it to be facing up. So I want to change the angle to 90 degrees. And then I can turn up or turn down the strength on that. But if I'm getting this weird angle, right, that's probably because I don't have enough geometry on my cube. So that means I need to turn up the segments on the Z. And then I can turn up the Y a little bit, turn down, let's see, Maybe turn down the Z a little. Go back to bend, fit to parent. There we go. And then I can scoot it over. Or well, scoot the whole thing over from the cube. There we go. And this is a trigger. And that's done. And the arm is technically done. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to show you guys how to do, let's see, let's start with the, so I made a rectangle spline, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this piece of the whisk right here, and I just want to fit it. Let's see, I'm going to switch to object mode because, let's see here, well no, I don't know, I want to stay in model mode. Yeah, because I don't want to end up with strange strange results. So if you're ever curious, the difference between model mode and object mode is the way that it scales. And so if I were to take this object and scale it in model mode, you don't see any change in the scale over here. But if I were to change this to object mode and scale, you'll start to see a difference in the scale over here. So that's why most of the time we end up working from model mode, if you're wanting to make sure that your model is scaling and not the scale values. Alright, cool. I can turn on rounding, object, rounding. That's pretty close. Just want to make it a little bit more. And then I could just make the same copy of this same thing, and then I could just scale it down. And probably just want to make the width a little less. There we go. Or, let's see. We'll see how this goes. So I want to, this is the small rectangle, right? And I'm going to put these in a sweep. And the way that sweep works is it just goes, make this sweep along that. And then if you're noticing weird results, then just change which plane it's on. And let's see, point, so I'm going to switch these, 0.74 and 0.3. Because I was noticing it was going wide this way and I didn't want that. Whoop. And if I'm having a hard time navigating to what I want, if I hit O, right, O should zoom in on my object, but I was selecting the small rectangle, so I should probably switch to sweep and go O. There you go. Alright, so this is Whisk Blade, and then probably want to make a duplicate of it, and then axis center, and just say centered, execute. And turn on include children and use all objects. There we go. Alright, and then I'm going to rotate it. 90 degrees. That looks good. Alright. So, the reason that this says to use a sweep instead of a lathe, because we could definitely use a lathe, that would probably work, is because we're going to learn something cool about the sweep. In that, with a sweep, I can take a end side, preferably, and scale it way down, because I just need it to be the size of the widest point on this. And then I can make a line. I have two ways I can do that. I can just make a rectangle, delete 3 points, or I could go to the spline pen, make a point, probably higher up, make another point, and then select the points, right? And I probably only want that spline selected. So now I have both points selected, then go to scale and just flatten it out this way. And now that should be perfectly straight. And then we'll make a sweep. So I'm going to hold down Alt, so that way it's made in the exact same point as that. And then the end side, if it looks funny, change the plane it's on. And probably turn up the subdivisions on that. Maybe 24 seems suitable. There we go. And then, so the cool thing about the sweep is that in the details down here, there is a scale curve we can play with. And earlier when we were making this curve, I told you that you could hold down Control to make a point on a line. And that definitely works. And so I also need to make sure that on this straight spline, that I change it to uniform and I turn up that number because that's going to be what allows this to change its size. So now you can see that. And so in order to see this easier, I'm going to right click inside this window and go show in separate window. So that way I can see my grid a little bit better. And then if I hold down, let's see. So I'm going to take this down to about the size I think I need it to be. So let's say 0.35. And then I'm going to select this point and probably also put it at 0.35. That looks good. And then so because I went to left tangent, so these tangents, right, are this handle. So by doing that, it allowed me to break the handle a little bit better. I probably do need it thinner. So I can take both of these points and just hold down Shift and drag them straight down until they're as thin as I want them to be. And then I can come back to this and maybe, oh right, only select this point. Widen them out a bit. Maybe drag it back up a little. There we go. So yeah, that's one way you can do that. And I believe the sweep has caps, so I can say I only want, I believe, the end cap, which is this down here, to have rounding. And then I can come to, see this spline right here, and can select the bottom point and move it up a little bit. There we go. That way it has that little rounded bottom there. Alright, so we got that done. We have the other parts done. What's next? Okay, so I can definitely make this bottom piece using an extrude. That's definitely possible. Or I can use it making a loft. And since we didn't get to use a loft for the body, I'm going to use that for down here. And I would recommend, let's look at some reference and see the shape of the base. So pick a Sunbeam mixer, vintage style base that you like, and come up with that shape. So I'm going to make from the top view, a rectangle spline, scale it way down, and let's see, I probably want it to for sure be the width of this, right? And then I could bring the width in that way. And I do also real quick want to make the end side that's going to be for the that circle base. Let's see, 36, I guess. Just because that's going to help me in determining the width of the front. Because I want to make sure that my base that the bowl sits in is big enough, and that the base that is underneath this is, you know, big enough for it. So okay, we've got that. I want to turn on rounding probably. And let's see, not on the inside though. I want to turn that on the rectangle. There we go. And so I probably want less rounding than I think, because I really only want it on these front two pieces. And then I want to make it editable. And then I want to take these two pieces, delete, and then take these two and scale them in. And then maybe take the handles. It's just easier for me to use a spline pen when messing with the handles. I don't know why the move tool doesn't ever work for me. There we go, that looks nice. So once I have a shape that I like for my base, and I've made sure it's big enough to fit everything, I might want to make it slightly wider. So I'm going to just select all of them, scale them slightly wider, because what I'm going to do is now I'm going to make a copy of that, and I'm going to move it up and scale it in, because I needed to follow this. And then I'm going to make a copy downwards and scale it down. And I'm going to bring, let's see, did I make that copy? Oh, okay. No, I want to make sure I'm in model mode when I make the copy. Right. E, control, drag, so that way I can take this and put it below. So I want to make sure these are in a stacking order. So that looks good there, that looks good there. This could maybe be a little bigger, I guess. And then maybe control drag up, and then scale that down. And the reason I did it that way is so that I could have that beveled edge still, kind of. And if I select all of these and, let's see, oh no, I want to just select one. Hold down Alt and put the loft, and take the rest, and make sure they're still in that same order though. Because if they come out of order, right, so I'll take one of these and put it out of order. You can see things can get a little mixed up. So you want to make sure that it's in order. And if you're like, wow, this is way too little geometry, you can just come into the loft and go to Object and turn up the Mesh Subdivisions. U is for horizontal, and V is for vertical. Turn that up so that way we can make that a little smoother, and then now it's time to do that for our circle base. So I can place it about there, control drag, scale it down, and then maybe control drag one in, but I probably don't want it to be too much thinner. And then E, control drag it down. Probably not all the way down, right? There we go. And then now all I have to do is take that, put it in a loft, take all the other ones, put them underneath so that they're still in the same order. There you go. And then same thing with this, probably make it 32. Or I think my original spline was 36. There you go. That should match up. And we could technically have made these one uniform loft, but you can run into some issues depending on the stacking order. So like if I take all these, I put them in there, right? You see how we get this twisting. And that has to do with the order of the splines points. When you make a parametric one, it automatically makes one. And so you can end up with some oddly shaped geometry. If you like this, you can definitely do that. It would just need to make sure that the mesh subdivisions around are suitable. But I'm going to make mine separate just because I prefer the way that looks. Okay. So this was the Whisk Pole, Whisk Blades. I'm going to group those, Alt-G, call this Whisk. And I probably want to go axis center and Y 100%, execute. And then I probably want to put the whisk inside of my symmetry stuff because that way I can have two. I only needed to make one. That's one way to do it. If you don't want to do it that way, you can always control drag and make the other one and then do some rotating. So I'm going to maybe rotate this one, I don't know, 25, and then take this one, rotate it about 25. Right, so you get that interlocking look. It's really up to you. All right, we're almost done here. So we only need two more things, which is just the cord and the bowl. So as for the bowl, it is just a lathe. So we're just going to take our spline pen and draw out the part of the bowl we need. Here, here, about there. Let's see, I'm probably just gonna make that straight. And then control drag here. And make my curve there. And then it's all about just lining up your spline until it looks like you want it to look. Take these bottom 2 points, T, scale them flat. And then I'm going to take all these points, right click, and let's see. and create outline. And then I'm going to just drag it in a little. And then I'm going to go back to my spline pen and make some adjustments. Right click, soft interpolation like we did earlier. That looks nice. That looks nice. And then if I come to over here in the spline and uncheck close spline, let's see, where does that? So that cuts off there. So what I want to do is I want to select probably this upper point and then right click, go down to point order and say set first point. And then I can come back over here and turn off close spline. And so this white line indicates the direction we're going in. So this is the first point, and then it comes around, and dark blue is the end. So that's the last point. All right, cool. So we've got that. The other thing we should probably do is this point right here, I want to change it to soft interpolation, and I probably want to drag it down a little bit. Just because, let's see, and same with this one, soft interpolation. I know I'm going to run into some issues later with this because the lathe does not like it perfectly flat on the inside for some reason. So now I can hold down, let's see, well first we need to do what we did last time. Shift C, axis center, and -100, -100, execute. And that will make our axis be at that bottom center point. Then we need to come down to lathe, alt, when you make it, as long as you have the spline selected, of course. Alt, there we go. That'll make it right at the axis center. And because we made sure that that wasn't perfectly straight on the bottom, we didn't get any issues on the bowl. All right, bowl is done. So for our chord, we could definitely do like we did for the whisk and make a sweep that is with a spline. But to have some flexibility, I'm going to show you how to make a different kind of sweep. And so I made a null, and I placed that null at the first point where I want my chord to be, and then hold down Control and drag to another point. Control drag, Control drag, Control drag, Control drag. And then I want to go to my MoGraph stuff. So that's in Cloner this time. And then I want to make a tracer. What a tracer does is it takes different things. It could be, you know, like if you have particles, it'll make splines out of the particles. In this case, I'm going to hit this little eyedropper and select all the different points I want to add in there because I saw that they didn't add in there the way I wanted them to. And then I want to tell it to, well, one, I need to tell it to stop picking. And then I need to tell it to connect all objects. But not only do I need to do that, because now it's connecting, but it's connecting in a straight line. So that means I want it to connect in a B-spline. B-spline. And then I need to tell it what kind of intermediate points. So I want it to be probably adaptive. So now that I have that set, I can make that end side for the, let's see, maybe 1 less, 0.5. And then sides though, maybe like 16. I don't think it needs that many. It's going to be kind of small. Yeah, scale it down even more. There we go. And then now we just need to make the sweep and put the tracer in the sweep with the inside. And if it doesn't work, change it until it looks like it's correct. And now we can select the null. And this is my top. And as we go down the line, we can adjust them. There we go. And so now what I like about this is that if I select all of these and I come down to object for a null, I can tell it to have a shape. So probably like a hexagon. That's super big. So maybe like 1. And then change it to be an orientation that does not change with the camera. So you can tell what direction it's facing. And that just helps in like, if I give it a shape, that helps in selecting it. If I want to be able to select it without going into the object manager every time. But in this case, I probably would have an easier time just doing it from there because I know the order of my points and I have it open right now. Okay, that looks good. And I think we're done. Oh wait, one last thing. Sorry. The feet. The feet of the base. I completely forgot about that. So we want the height segments to be 1, rotation segments can remain 16, and make it pretty small. And then I can probably shove this in a taper and it would probably be fine. And so I'd want to hold down shift because that'll automatically make the taper a child of the cylinder, and when it's automatically made like that, it automatically is fit to parent. But I do need to make it Y negative and then fit to parent. And then now I can turn up the strength. And because there aren't any subdivisions in between, it does it perfectly straight. Okay. And then now I can take the one I've already made, scoot it to the side, control drag towards the back, and then I can take both of these, so this is back foot, front foot, and I can put them inside of my symmetry stuff from earlier. And let's see, I hope that worked. All right, I have to make sure it's inside of the null. And now it is symmetry down there. All right, cool. That was the last thing. All right. I hope this helps somebody. That should be all. All right, bye-bye.